Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of New York University, Steinhardt School of Culture, Education and Human Development, the NYU Arts and Health Initiative, and our NYU Club of London, I welcome you all to our event tonight, The Arts and Health in the UK. My name is Shoba Nahappan, and I'm a 2006 alumni of NYU Steinhardt School, and I feel very privileged as an alum of Steinhardt and a member of the Dean's Advisory Board to be part of the team that has organized tonight's event and what promises to be a most interesting discussion on transformative power of the arts and well-being. Tonight's event is a unique opportunity for NYU Steinhardt to connect with all NYU alumni and friends in London and beyond, as well as many researchers and thought leaders working in the field of the arts and wellness in the UK. We hope your attendance tonight will be a platform for engagement with us in the future. Tonight's event would not have been possible without the strong support and initiative of the Dean of NYU Steinhardt, Mr. Jack Knott. I'm therefore very pleased to be able to welcome Dean Knott and his wife, Sherry Short, and Dr. Nisha Sajnani, founder of Arts and Health at NYU, to London. I would also like to recognize the support of NYU London and thank our director of NYU London, Catherine Robson, and her team. A special mention and thank you also to our NYU Alumni Club of London. Thank you for the support and leadership by Ivo Konotneris and the alums for proudly flying our NYU flag in London. Thank you all for your hard work. The Alumni Club in London holds several events throughout the year. Our next event is organized with the LSE alumni on the 13th of October. More information can be found through the QR code on your program. Alums, we hope you will be able to join us again on the 13th of October. With those few remarks, I would now like to turn this event over to fellow Steinhardt alumna, Dr. Rebecca Zarate. Dr. Zarate is Associate Professor of Music Therapy at Lesley University and past coordinator of the Music Therapy graduate program in the Expressive Therapies Department, Graduate School of Arts and Social Sciences. She's a psychotherapist, musician, and a researcher and educator of music therapy and art therapies. Her research focuses on stress and anxiety and improvisation-based music therapy in clinical, social, and cultural community contexts. She's co-editor for the Journal of Creative Arts in Education and Therapy, and she has recently authored the book Music, Psychotherapy, and Anxiety: Social, Community, and Clinical Contexts. I could go on, but instead, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Zarate.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Just make sure I get my right height here. So thank you for that warm introduction, Shoba. As a music therapist and educator, I have held a deep appreciation and commitment to the health benefits of music in reducing anxiety and promoting well-being. As we saw during the height of the pandemic, we turn to music in times of stress and isolation to lift our spirits and feel a sense of communication with each other. I received my master's in music therapy from NYU Steinhardt in 1999 to 2001. And so it gives me great pleasure tonight, as a Brit who is in America, coming here today for the Arts and Health, to introduce to you Dr. Jack Knott, who currently serves as the Dean of the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education and Human Development at New York University, and holds the Gail and Ira Druckier Dean's Chair. He is a leading scholar in the fields of political institutions and public policy. Before joining NYU Steinhardt, he served as the Dean of the Sol Price School of Public Policy at the University of Southern California from 2005 to 2020, where he held the C. Owen and Leona L. Piper Chair in Public Policy and Management. Without further ado, welcome Dean Knott.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was very kind. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Shoba, for all you've done as a Steinhardt Alumni Advisory Board member to bring tonight's event to fruition. Thank you. Yeah, we should give Shoba a big round of applause. Thank you, Shoba. Thank you also to our panelists and our alumni, and a special thank you in advance to Stone Flowers. You remind us that art has the power to redeem, to heal, and comfort us in times of grief, and like now with the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And this is a special time for my wife Cherry and me as well to be in London, as Cherry is a British citizen who received the CBE from the Queen in 2006. Cherry worked as a political appointee in the Tony Blair government and as the race commissioner for Wales. So thank you, Cherry, for joining us as well. Thank you. I am so pleased to welcome you to our conference, Arts and Health at NYU. It's a pleasure to be here today with our alumni community, our colleagues from NYU London, and friends, innovators, and supporters of the healing arts. Today, health and wellness is a topic of really great importance at NYU, and as well as all of its partners around the world. We launched Art and Health at NYU last September. The mission of the initiative is to bring educators, artists, researchers, and students together from across the university and to engage with policymakers in the community to advance our understanding of the physical, psychological, and social health benefits of the arts. As many of you know, NYU Steinhardt is a uniquely interdisciplinary school, and also, in my view, the best in the world, devoted to a holistic, interdisciplinary understanding of people and human development across the entire lifespan. And that includes fields in art, music, nutrition, psychology, media and communication, health and wellness, culture, and education. In our work as a school, we aspire to interconnect the arts and the humanities with the social, behavior, and biological sciences. And there's very few schools that can do this. Through statistical and scientific analysis, visual works of art, narratives, and musical compositions and performance, we work together to try to improve people's lives. Because we are keenly aware that solutions to problems don't come from a single source, but from the creativity that emerges when researchers, scholars, artists, and clinicians cross disciplines, continents, and in this case even time zones, to work together toward a common good. At Steinhardt, one of our unique interdisciplinary strengths is the capacity for collaboration in art, drama, dance, and music therapy, in education, and in mental and physical health. For example, it's not uncommon to find a speech pathologist working with a musician, or a therapist working with a visual artist, or a choreographer working with a public school teacher. It's really amazing. And the synergy and the creativity that comes out of that is truly remarkable. Researchers tell us that the arts and the creative arts therapies show great promise in reducing isolation, improving cognitive ability, and can help people to recover their creativity, imagine a better future, put ideas into action, and after injury or illness, feel alive again. Our Art and Health at NYU initiative grew out of our excitement about the richness and possibilities within our school and the university to make an impact on these quality of life issues. In his 1946 book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, a Nazi death camp survivor, wrote, "Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment that it finds meaning." That's a major goal behind our Arts and Health at NYU initiative. In our collaborations, we strive to find meaning, to broaden the reach of the healing arts by creating the data and empirical proof that shows how art can be a powerful and transformative tool in the physical and mental health care, and to show how the arts can be used to advance the education, health, and well-being of people and communities in New York City, but in London and also around the world. So tonight's event is the second in a series of conversations with the NYU Global Sites, highlighting the central role of the arts in health and healing. Last spring, we spoke by Zoom with the academic and artistic community in NYU Accra in Ghana. Tonight, we are here in person to learn from our colleagues in the UK, to talk, to sing, and to share ideas and to build a bridge to more collaboration. So I want to say thank you to our London colleagues and the NYU Alumni Club of London for their partnership for tonight's event. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Nisha Sajnani, who is the real star of the show. We're going to finally get to the program. But I need to say a few things about her. In addition to her being just an absolutely wonderful person who you all should get to know, Dr. Sajnani is the director of our graduate program in drama therapy, and she's the founder of the Arts and Health at NYU initiative. She is an award-winning author, educator, arts advocate, whose work explores the unique ways in which the aesthetic experience can inspire care and collective human flourishing across the lifespan. She is currently leading a World Health Organization commission to synthesize the global evidence on the health benefits of the creative arts therapies and the applied arts. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Nisha Sajnani. Nisha?
Thank you, first of all, Jack, for that wonderful and warm introduction, and the commissions and the collaborations and the initiative, the Arts and Health at NYU. None of that happens alone, so in that spirit, I'm coming up with the full team, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. All right. So I just want to say, the UK has, as all of you know, or perhaps some of you are newer to this conversation, but knowing some of you in the audience, I know that you're aware that the UK has played such a significant role with regards to leading practice, policy, and research in this area of arts and health. Just today I was at a gallery called Hauser and Wirth. Hospital Rooms had a wonderful exhibit there. Hospital Rooms brings artists into hospitals, and they, just completely re-envision very dreary spaces to lift morale both of staff and of patients, and they do that in a very collaborative, participatory manner. And that exhibit, I believe, is on till tomorrow morning, so you have a short time to catch it if you'd like to. But Ebe-san is here, right there in the fourth row, if you'd like. I'm just going to single you out for a minute, because Ebe-san is bringing Hospital Rooms to Lagos and is already implementing it there in a hospital. So we can see how these ideas travel and get scaled, and where the challenges are in that as well. So some of that we're going to touch on in our conversation tonight as well. And I want to say something about this place as well, because 5 years ago I was next door at the Wellcome Trust, where Christopher Bailey, who's the Arts and Health lead for the World Health Organization, was just starting to talk about that initiative. And here we are just a few years later with, it just seems to be exploding. It's moving in all directions. There's plenty to do, plenty to get involved with, plenty to get excited about, and also some challenges that are showing up as well. And I think we're going to get into that. I've continued to collaborate with Chris and the WHO on the commission that Jack mentioned, and also on the development of a global lab to help to coordinate efforts in this area with different collaborating centers. and we can talk about that a little bit more as we go. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our wonderful panelists who are going to be joining us this evening. Hold on just a minute while I put this down here next to you, Antonia. There we go. All right. So returning, it's just a sure thing that everything works out well right up until you're about to begin. So somebody can help me get that slide back up there, I'm sure. There it is. Fantastic. All right. Good. Okay. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to 5 people whose scholarship and practice has been instrumental in helping us understand how the arts and arts therapies, culture, and creativity can help us to recover hope and vitality, communicate with dignity, and feel a greater sense of belonging, live longer, fuller lives. So as we proceed in the conversation, my colleagues are going to be passing around note cards which you can note any questions you might have on, and we'll take them at the end. So to my far left is Sepideh Sahar. Sepideh is a trustee and treasurer of Music Action International, and she's been a member of Stoneflowers since 2011, and we'll have the pleasure of listening to Stoneflowers a little bit later on. There we go. She's an advocate who works regularly with asylum seekers, refugees, and survivors of torture. Dr. Antonia Zachariou is senior lecturer in early childhood studies at the University of Roehampton and is also on faculty at NYU London. Phil Jones is a professor of children's rights and well-being at the Institute of Education, and previously was Director of Research in the School of Education at the University of Leeds. He's the author of numerous books and publications that have advanced our understanding of the arts therapies and child agency and voice. Professor Vicky Karkou is the Director of Research of the Research Center for Arts and Wellbeing at Edge Hill University, and an internationally known researcher who has authored over 100 peer-reviewed publications disseminating research results from systematic reviews, randomized controlled trials, as well as qualitative and creative projects. If you have questions about methodology, she's the one you want to speak with, definitely. So Vicky's also a member of our NYU Creative Arts Therapies Consortium and International Research Alliance, and has been innovating arts-based approaches to well-being in a project entitled Arts for the Blues, which you'll hear about shortly. Alexandra Coulter is the director of the UK National Centre for Creative Health, which launched in March 2021 in response to recommendation 1 in the Creative Health Report, which was published in 2017, following a 2-year inquiry by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing. Alex is also the part-time director of Arts and Health Southwest. So I'm going to begin with you, Antonia. Your research has been concerned with the role of music in supporting children's development. And could you just tell us a little bit more about this?
Of course. Thank you very much. So I think I'm going to start by explaining that we start with the premise that music is something that everyone can make. So what our research has been looking at is musical play. So musical play is something that young children do from very early on in their lives. It's a universal type of play. It entails vocalizations, rhythmic movements of the body, playing with sound-making objects. So what we did, this research started, so the research journey started from the University of Cambridge with Dr. David Whitebread, and then continued again with Dr. David Whitebread, but also Professor Hargreaves and Professor Bonville-Rossi at the University of Roehampton. So what we were looking at was whether musical play could afford for children's self-regulation development. So when I say musical play, in plain words, we mean hand-clapping games, like you can see on the right-hand side. We mean circle games, as you can see on the left-hand side. And we also mean movement play, so dancing or moving to the music, playing with instruments, so creating music, and singing play, so creating songs, so the children creating songs. So what we did was that we observed children while they were doing musical play to see specifically an aspect of their development that we call self-regulation. So self-regulation is monitoring and controlling all aspects of our behavior, monitoring and controlling our emotions, monitoring and controlling what's going on cognitively, monitoring and controlling our motivation, but also monitoring and controlling our social skills. So we know that self-regulation is very important for our learning when we're very young, but also later in life. We know that self-regulation is very important for health, for employment later in life, for mental health later in life. So the idea was, if we implement musical play, would we be able to reinforce young children's self-regulation? Now, we are just making the very first steps, but what we were able to see, I'm going to try to keep this short. So what we were able to see was that self-regulation allowed children to express their emotions, to monitor their emotions. And most importantly, even though I said we were looking at self-regulation, we were also looking for co-regulation and socially shared regulation. Now, co-regulation is when one person controls or tries to show another person how to do something. It's in a way an unequal relationship. But socially shared regulation is a more egalitarian way of doing things, which is we need these skills as a society. We need the skills. We need to be socially regulated. So what we found was that musical play was an activity that would allow for more socially shared regulation compared to self-regulation or compared to co-regulation. And it was the first time we were finding this in comparison to other types of play or other types of activities. So it seems that music, we know that music promotes unity, but in musical play, you can't do hand-clapping games if, bear with me, you can't do hand-clapping games if you don't have a shared understanding of what you're doing with your partner, right? Because if I'm doing this and you're just standing there like this, it's not going to work. So we need intersubjectivity. We need a shared understanding. We need interdependency in musical play. So this promotes unity, this promotes cohesion, this promotes what we term socially shared regulation, and it promotes dynamic, coordinated, interdependent work. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we think that musical play is a way in which we could reinforce young children's self-regulation as early as possible, because we know that self-regulation is malleable. And I also think that it might be a route towards helping with cohesion and helping with perhaps incorporating more vulnerable populations or incorporating people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I think, is that...
That's terrific. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing us into just a glimpse of your work, Antonia. I'm actually wondering about Sepideh. You've been working with Music Action's Harmonizes program with children, and I'm wondering if you've noticed if there's anything that you can resonate with here. Does music facilitate a sense of unity, a sense of social cohesion in the children that you've worked with through Music Action's Harmonizes program?
Sure. I was listening and I just could remember the reaction and interacting that we would have seen from children. For example, at the beginning of the sessions and at the beginning of the whole period, we had some children who were very shy, wouldn't like to participate in any sort of activity, no matter how we tried to encourage them, but they were just standing in the corner and didn't want to basically participate and come to the group. But after probably the third session, they were just very active and very enthusiastic to get into the activities and basically just skill share and working with others, and through the whole sessions we were showing children how to use basically instruments, different instruments, just trying to let them just experience how different instruments feels, just playing with them around, and also we were helping them how to develop a song or develop a rhythm for the songs. Exactly the same methods you have used, all the by hand clapping, by making sounds, by different sounds through mouth, or using different parts of bodies, and basically it was amazing. At the end of each Harmonize project, we have a very big performance that different schools, children from different schools come together and they perform the songs that they have learned through the sessions, the Harmonize project. And we have had amazing response and feedback from children, from school, principals and teachers, and also from the parents, because the parents come basically to see the children perform. So I absolutely agree with every part that you mentioned. Yeah.
So you've been finding ways to give voice to children through music, and I see a real connection between that and your work, Phil, where you've been focusing your attention on elevating the voices of children in research specifically, so that they can inform the research that affects their own lives. And one of the ways you've done that is through the arts. Could you bring us into some of that work?
For sure. I mean, I don't know you, but I figured what would be bringing you here tonight is some curiosity and momentum around issues to do with the arts and voice and empowerment, and connected to what you've just said. Some of our research relates to that. And I thought about what I might share. So in my 3 or 4 minutes, I thought it might be useful to think of some things and present some things that maybe anticipate the work we're all going to witness from the Stone Flowers. And one of the things Stone Flowers talks about is to do with empowerment. They have a lovely phrase that you talk about, the people who've experienced trauma become architects of their own recovery. And that's something I want you to think about when you witness what I'm about to share. That notion of being architects of their own recovery through the arts, for me, is to do with empowerment, in that people become, instead of victims or being silenced within a process, to find voice within that and to find power within that. So I'd like to build a bridge between our research and that element of the Stone Flowers work. The other element is to do with voice and silence. In that research has shown that many people who have experienced trauma find it culturally hard to communicate about what's happened to them. And some of our work relates to that concept in relationship to children. So, for example, I don't know about you, but the culture I was brought up in, there was a phrase called "children should be seen and not heard." And there are many ways in which societies traditionally have silenced children. And I think the arts can be a way in which children use play, but also other art forms, to become eloquent. And again, when I think we move into the Stone Flowers section, it'll be interesting to think about the ways in which music has enabled Stone Flowers project and people involved to become eloquent about their experience. And I know that you've worked with Little Amal using puppets as a way of working with children as well. So we're going to share some material from some of the research. Again, it's just a snippet. And I should say very clearly that the children and young people whose voices you're about to hear have given full consent within ethics to share this in this kind of context. It's from a project funded by Lancaster Chase, where we train children to be researchers into their own lives, and we use participatory methods within that. And the children devise their own work. So we're just going to hear a little bit of some of the presentation they created to use in this kind of context. So bear in mind what I said. One theme to do with empowerment and voice, and the other one to do with the way in which the arts create eloquence.
We ran a focus group with 1 year group. We asked people to draw pictures about things we decided on. What's the first thing you think of when you hear the word unemployment? How might you be affected if your parents are unemployed? Then, once the pictures were made, people talked about them, and we asked, how does someone feel if your family parents were unemployed? How could unemployment in a family affect a child's social life? Could it affect someone's parents' psychological health? And can it harm your schoolwork or homework?
So I hope that short extract from the children gives you a sense both of the potency of enabling children to make decisions about what to research and what they want to find out about and what they want to communicate, but also the ways in which the arts can capture and communicate in ways that words alone cannot. I think those images speak very strongly in ways that words alone couldn't. And I guess that builds a bridge, as I've said, with the work we're going to hear from the Stone Flowers, where music, I think, performs a very parallel function to that. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Phil. If you actually just go over to the next slide, I just want to take a moment to amplify this, or rather underline this bridge that Phil was just speaking about, and just to share with our audience here that University College London and Arts and Health at NYU are going to continue this conversation on equity, voice, agency, and care practices in the arts and arts therapies with a monthly series of seminars with colleagues from around the world speaking about this topic and sharing projects. So you can look forward to the first one actually in October, and we can share information about that through the emails that you provided when you registered. We're going to turn now to you, Vicky, moving into adulthood and older age, because I know you work right across the lifespan. You've noticed that routinely prescribed psychological therapies for depression are not always effective. And you've been researching the role of the arts and arts therapies in promoting well-being and managing symptoms in the Arts for the Blues project. Take us into that. Yeah.
Yes. It is a bit of a shift now from the previous projects we talked about are very much child-focused. So,
yes, we're moving in. Go ahead, wherever you'd like to, because I know you've worked across the board.
I have, and this project I'm going to talk about, it's called Arts for the Blues. It did start originally from work with adults in primary services in the NHS, what is called IAP services, Improving Access to Psychological Services. It did start because there was a problem in a number of people attending the NHS for the hospitals for their issues around depression and anxiety. Over 50% do not complete. So that's a massive dropout from what is currently primarily a talking therapy option. And so that was one of the main problems that got us started. We also, within the context of arts and health, were very aware that there were lovely, impactful projects that were not sustainable, not long-lasting. So we want to create something that was very much not that. We wanted something that would have continuity and will have opportunities for services and provision to be longer lasting and hopefully with an ongoing impact. So we developed the Arts for the Blues. It falls under the Research Centre for Arts and Wellbeing at Edgehill University, which is outside Liverpool. It's in collaboration with the University of Salford, and it's been going on for something like 7-8 years now. We got funding from the Arts Council, got funding from the Clinical Commissioning Group, from arts and health funding sources, and currently, we have funding from the UKRI and the Arts and Humanities Research Council for scaling up what was a smaller project into a larger project that can be used in the northwest of England. This is what you see, the slide you see up is from the funders. The call is under the theme of mobilizing community assets to tackle health inequalities, and it is linked with a National Centre for Creative Health that Alex will talk about more, and would possibly correct me on the facts and figures there as well. So this is one of the several projects that are happening at the moment as an opportunity to have work that is more long-lasting and impacts on systems. We had a lot of attention in the development of the intervention and the model of work, and I'll say a couple of things more about that. But what this funding drew our attention to is that if we are to use it in different services, we need to think more globally. We need to be thinking about policymakers, managers of services, frontline staff, workers in different institutions, the whole, all the people contributing to a change culture, forming of culture and change of culture. And we also were very multidisciplinary. We talked, I think, Jack talked about multidisciplinarity. The project is definitely very multidisciplinary. It involves, this is a picture of the team, or part of the team. We have me as an arts therapist, but we also have in the founding group an artist, a poet. And we have a counseling psychologist who is primarily a talking therapist. And for the purposes of this work, we also included an implementation scientist because we were researchers and clinicians, but implementation science is a field in itself that we needed support on. We also had ongoing involvement of lived experience experts, people who had experience of the Arts for the Blues group. And I don't know how much more to say other than as part of this scaling up methodology, the idea of systems, I think, is important, and how we can impact on systems. We used methodologically a 9 steps guide from the WHO on how to scale up projects. It's a realist evaluation, and one of our assumptions is that if a complex arts-based intervention is simplified by use by practitioners with different or less training, this can improve spread and adoption. The model is an evidence-based model that draws on best practice and best evidence. It's also quite complex in its original inception because it comes from people who have trained for years to how to deliver safely arts within a context of psychotherapy. And we had to simplify it as much as we could in order to be able to spread it out. And we developed training programs as part of that, and had stakeholders events, which involved 5 NHS trusts, 6 charities, and we have over 15 student projects that are spin-off projects from this work. Yes, I think I'm going to stay here, but to stop here, one of the things that came from the stakeholders was an interesting quote. I think I'm going to stop with this. One of the stakeholders said the use of the arts becomes a level playing field in which to engage people where they're at and take them on a journey. And I thought that was an important thing to hold on for the value of the arts within, sort of the capacity to speak different languages and be able to bypass barriers, I guess.
Thank you for that, Vicky. I'm going to pick up on your remarks about working across teams that may speak different languages, and the remarks you made about scaling up the arts for the blues, which I know you are doing now through the NHS Northwest, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going to turn that over to you, Alex, to ask you first about what the National Centre is doing to integrate creative health throughout the NHS.
Yes, thank you, Nisha. So, as Nisha said in the introduction, the National Centre for Creative Health was established in response to a recommendation in the Creative Health Report, which was the result of a 2-year national inquiry. And there were 10 recommendations, and the recommendations attempted to influence at every stage of the cycle of this whole field, if you like. So they ranged from recommendations around medical education and arts education, through to the voice of lived experience and how that can impact on the work, through to systems change within health services, the NHS particularly, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Recommendation to the Arts Council on a policy level, and as we said, the recommendation to set up a national centre, and a final recommendation, the only one we have made no progress on, which was a recommendation to government for a cross-governmental strategy. So the National Centre, in a way, its role is to pursue that broad agenda, but looking at research, policy and practice and the intersection of those and how they work together and how we can effect change. So there's a big focus on culture change and a big focus on systems change, which Vicky has mentioned. And we work across systems through we have a strong focus on lived experience, and then we work on research and policy. And with the systems change stuff and the NHS, so some of you will be familiar with the fact that we've just had a new bill passed through Parliament which sets up statutory bodies called integrated care systems. Nothing new, actually, quite based on an American, can't remember the name of them in America. It's the idea of integration, in this case at a certain geographic level, bringing together local authorities, social care, NHS health services and community, and very importantly for our field, there is now a structural route in for community providers into decision making at this geographic level, which is integrated care systems. So we've been working with people in the NHS central team to look at how creative health can be embedded in that process as these systems are established and they develop their plans over the next few years. And so we've been working in partnership with them with 4 of these systems, if you like, 2 who are right ahead of the game, one in West Yorkshire, one in Gloucestershire, where actually the main thing is that the systems leaders were totally committed to this work. So there's a huge thing around leadership in terms of how this work progresses, and then 2 systems where they were keen but they really hadn't got anything embedded. So that's been a huge learning curve around what the barriers are, what the opportunities are, how can we really look at the context in which this work can flourish. What are the funding issues? An obvious one, but it's as much as Vicky was talking about this notion of innovation and adoption. So how does change happen in systems? How do you work with all of those health professionals? Because there are a huge number of relational issues, and this work is very relational, as we all know, and it's not the case that you can take the evidence base and make it happen, nor is it the case that you can showcase the practice and make it happen. You kind of have to work across both research and practice to influence change in the systems themselves, I would say. So yes, that's a big part of our work around trying to affect change within the current developments within the NHS and health systems in England, because our health policy is devolved, so Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales have slightly different structures. And then, yes, we're working with the research councils on this big research programme, which is ongoing. So Vicky's part of the first cohort, 12 projects across the country, trying to move a little bit away from intervention, focusing on intervention, improving the efficacy of interventions, into how does that get adopted, how, how's it sustainable, as Vicky's been explaining. And then the next phase of the research programme, which people may be aware of, because it has been a call that has closed relatively recently, is for collaborative research groups, again at this systems level across universities with community providers. So and very strong emphasis on lived experience and the voice of lived experience in terms of sort of community researchers. And then the next phase will be quite a big program with a decent amount of money invested in implementing that, so taking it to a sort of more sustainable implementation phase.
There was a lot. I mean, so we're hearing some themes here about, I mean, in a way, this panel is an embodiment of that attempt to speak across languages, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of primary science, in terms of doing programs on the ground, in terms of ensuring that the voices of those who are most affected by this work are also informing this work and the knowledge that's created about it, to scaling up the work and implementing it, integrating it, funding it, continuing to research it, and the challenges and opportunities that lay within all of those attempts. And so there are a number of different themes threads to pull on here, as well as ones that haven't been spoken. We've been talking about a number of different arts and health practices and arts therapies practices, and we're talking about that pretty casually, even though I know, there's much to talk about there in terms of the different practices that make up this large field. When we talk about the health benefits of the arts, there are many practices that are implicated there. So there's much to pull on, much to talk about, and I wonder if there are any comments or questions. I'm looking for Eva around the room, and okay, so I'm just going to scan the room, and if you do have a comment or question, if you could just raise your hand. Yes, and you know what? We do have an extra mic, possibly. Hold on a second. Could we, Sepideh, maybe we could share one. Actually, I'm going to take Antonia's because it's right next to me. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pass you number 3. For those in the booth, number 3. It's on? Can you check if it's on?
It's on?
Yes, it's on. Terrific. And if you are comfortable doing so, feel free to introduce yourself as well. If you've got the mic, it would be wonderful to know a little bit of who's in the room. Or you can just make your comment or ask your question. That's fine too.
Now you've just put me on the spot.
I know I did. I'm sorry.
I'm Lucy Beresford. It's a really, really interesting panel and just really lovely to hear of all the work that you're doing. It's very inspiring. My question is for really any of you that wants to pick up the baton on this. 2 parts, really. What do you think of the idea that there are some people who cannot sing, who don't have any musicality, who aren't able to clap in rhythm? The reason I'm asking that is because I have a friend, genuinely a friend, not me, who was told as a child that they were not able to sing and they weren't able to clap along. They were only allowed to tap with their fingers. And I just wondered, given that sentiment, have any of you bumped up against that in your work? And if so, how have you dealt with it? In 2 minutes, please. No. Take your time.
I can speak to that. I come from a dance movement therapy background. The equivalent to music can easily be said about dancing and how many feet one has and what type, if they're left or right or what they are. One of the things that I guess as a dance movement therapist, one of the things that I say at the very beginning of the work is that dancing is not an essential, dance skills is not an essential requirement, and equivalent to that music skills, because the idea is that we're using our body, we're breathing, we're existing in space. We move and walk or not, depending on whether we have the capacity. And this, what we are exploring is what does this mean psychologically? How can I relate with others through this body and these skills I have? If I was in a different context, if the aim is not to explore what it means psychologically and how I can be with others through that the artistic skill I have, then this becomes a different story, right? If the aim is to develop musical skills or become a a prima ballerina, it's a very different story from what it is to relate with others, or what it means to relate with myself and find out psychological meaning behind it. So I think context and purpose makes a big difference. And in my world, the skill is not important.
Yes, please. Thank you. So I think I would add to that, I originally studied to become a primary school teacher, and we had to take a music education class. And you would imagine, like the other students, if they didn't have a musical background, they were like, oh, no, me? I have to sing in front of a class of pupils? No, I can't. So the problem is, musicality is universal. That's what research shows us at the moment. So we are born to be able to sing. We're born to be able to appreciate music. We're born to be able to engage with music. The idea is that the very first conversations between infants and caregivers, which we call proto-conversations, are inherently musical in nature. The caregiver speaks, the baby, the newborn responds. Even the newborn responds. We're listening to music from the third trimester of pregnancy. We are exposed to music, to sounds. So I think everyone is able to engage with music. The problem is what happens when we go to school, when we start getting assessed about our music skills, and when you might encounter that, hopefully not any longer, that teacher who says, oh no, you can't sing, or you're offbeat, or that is the problem. It's the approach, usually, in schools. That's the detrimental part in music. But otherwise, I think research shows that everyone can do music.
Would you like to add to that? What do you think about what you're hearing?
I'm just so relieved. I don't know. I'm relieved because that's my theory too, is that actually it's an innate language, it's a pre-verbal language that we all have access to, and that something happens that shuts that down for some people. As you say, maybe it does happen in school, or it can happen within families with sibling teasing or something. And if only we could get that message out there, that actually it is a skill, it is a talent within all of us. There could be a lot of freedom that comes out of that, which we could all tap into. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a comment over here, Eva. Or a question.
Hello, my name is Lon, and then I studied music at NYU. My question is about accessibility, and then how to engage with children or adults from diverse background in 21st century. When we talk about music being universals and stuff, I often have difficult time when I'm working with primary school kids coming from different culture. It's the music that I often use is not something that kids might be familiar with. And then how do you work in, for example, in a group setting that promote self-regulation and then co-regulations when the kids coming from diverse background in the cities like London and New York City? How do you, how do you pick the music or the type of art that you do, and but also that removing the barriers to the kids from the kids of color or people of color to be able to access the music as accessible form.
So we're saying that art is accessible, art is universal, but it's also full of preferences. It's incredibly diverse. We're talking about different kinds of symbolic, different kinds of symbolic language. And I'm wondering, Phil, if you might want to comment on this, because in your work, you've needed to attune to the art that makes sense to the kids that you're working with.
For sure. I'm going to draw a link between both questions. One way of looking at your question is to do with the messages that we give children and the power of adults in relationship to that. So I can remember being in primary school and a teacher walking behind us and listening very carefully to each child's voice and then poking them in the back. And she said, if you're a groaner, that was the term, I will poke you in the back and you mustn't sing. And for me, that encapsulates a kind of power dynamic that can often occur between adults and children. And I'm going to draw a parallel with what you've just said. I think one of the temptations between adult facilitator, for example, and child is within a tradition that therapy falls in as well as education that sees a child as an empty vessel. So the adult becomes the person with the knowledge, with the skill, with the vocabulary, and the child becomes the deficit, if you like, that you pour this knowledge into, that you give. And our research challenges that notion and rather sees a key part of the role between the facilitator, whether a teacher or a therapist, is to listen to the child and to find out the child's language or the different children's languages within the art form, within a group, and then to create a dynamic whereby the child or the children are empowered. So that, if you like, you create a vocabulary that is child-centric rather than with a notion that you as the facilitator have the answer, the language, the rubric, the menu. So it's a brief answer to a very complex set of dynamics and questions. So,
Sepideh, did you want to comment on this as well?
Sure, actually, maybe I just echoing everybody comments here, and also I'm just talking about experience, not anything academic. While we were working through a harmonized project, and we had children, as I mentioned, they were from different backgrounds, and some of them were already familiar, at some sort of level familiar with music, or some of them nothing at all, even they've been sort of banned from just any willingness toward music. But through those sessions, we managed to basically, I think what we did probably that works was we tried to think and explain the way that two kids basically talk to each other. We tried to bring down what we wanted to transfer and teach them, just bring it down to their own language. How the kids, not as a teacher or as a tutor to their kids, we just basically brought ourselves down at the same level as kids and children there. And we just tried to make it easy for them to observe it. Nothing that is very inaccessible for them. We just created different games, different to help them and ask them. They were some sort of they were frightened how we're going to just create music. What is happening? It's very difficult. You have to be professional to do this. But for example, myself and through. If I just go to Stoneflowers, how Stoneflowers as a grown-up group, where we start to work, is probably 99% of Stoneflowers members didn't have any music background, including myself. I'm your friend that you mentioned. I am your friend that didn't have any confidence, although I loved music and always wanted to be able to sing or play, but I never had that chance, or I never had that braveness in myself to go for it, probably. But when I started, basically, when I joined Stoneflowers, I think the facilitator just created that safe environment for us, that we were able to just create the lyrics. And I, for example, myself I was very frightened, and I was just like kind of scared. Oh, I can't do this. There should be rhythm. There should be, rhymes in the lyrics that you're creating. But I can't do this. I don't have that knowledge. But The way that facilitators explained it to us and basically free us from the fear that we had was absolutely amazing. And that transition was, we even didn't feel it. And one day I just sat there and just wrote a couple of words, and that turned into lyrics. And then we created music for it, and then everybody, okay, so which part would you like to be sang by chorus, or which part would you like to sing it yourself? And I was like, no, I can't do it. I can't sing. I don't have that voice. And said, no, just try it. Just go for it. And then through the rehearsals and practice, we were just given, directions. Okay, if you do it that way, if you sing it that way, go higher, go lower. It was just it. That's it. That is how we basically work through within Stoneflowers. And I think it's same for the kids as well. And it's much easier if you just bring it down to their language rather than just trying to explain it. I'm sure teachers know better than me, but from my own experience, I think this is the way that best works for everybody.
You're describing a very collaborative process that takes time, and that was very meaningful. And Phil, can I ask you to advance this slide one?
Sure.
Thank you. And you've given us a preview into what we're about to see next, right? So we've heard a lot of different perspectives. Is there anything in what you heard that speaks to you with regards to the interest behind your question?
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you for the comment. I think at this point, because we've already launched ourselves a bit into Stoneflowers and we've been teasing about it the entire time, that's exactly where we're going to go next. And of course, we can continue the conversation after the brief concert as part of the reception. I want to thank each and every one of you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your perspectives here.